Hello, this is Chef John from foodwishes.com with Shakshuka for one. That's right, sometimes we need to take a break from that bowl of cereal and not just make a better breakfast, but make what I think is one of the best breakfasts. And while Shakshuka is great for a group, it's also perfect for scaling down to one portion, which is exactly what I'm about to show you how to do. And the first thing we'll need is some kind of small pan. And for me, these little cast iron skillets are a great choice. But really, any old small frying pan will work. And once we decide on a pan, we'll start by adding two ingredients you can never eat enough of, which would be some nice extra virgin olive oil, which we will cover with some thickly sliced mushrooms. And once we arrange those in a single layer, we'll go ahead and sprinkle over a little bit of salt. And then we'll top those mushrooms with some sliced red onions, or of course the onions of your choice. And then on top of the onions, we'll finish up with some mixed sliced peppers. And I use three kinds, some red bell, some Anaheim, which are green, and then some sliced jalapeno. And then we'll finish up by sprinkling on one more pinch of salt before we head to the stove, where we're going to place this on medium-high heat. Or if you're on a gas stove, the highest heat setting we can do without the flames coming up and around our pan. Right? We want the flames under the pan. And then what we'll do for the next few minutes is nothing. We are just going to wait for our mushrooms to start to sizzle in that olive oil. And because we topped our mushrooms with that little pinch of salt, moisture is going to be pulled out, which is actually what causes that irresistible sizzling sound, which if you haven't heard it before, is a little something like this. And what we're trying to accomplish here in these first few minutes is to get some nice browning on the bottom of those mushrooms. And yes, we're allowed to peek. And the reason I like to layer the veggies is because this way all those mushrooms are in contact with the pan. Okay, if we just tossed everything in, only some of them would be in contact. And also while those are browning, that hot steam being produced is sort of softening our onions and peppers above, which is giving them a little head start for when we stir everything together, which we can do as soon as we're happy with how browned our mushrooms got. And yes, a freakishly small wooden spoon would be a good choice here. But anyway, we'll give those a quick stir and cook our onions and peppers for about a minute. Okay, they don't need that long, since they are going to simmer and soften up in the tomato sauce. So like I said, we'll give those a relatively quick stir fry. And then before we do add our tomato and other sauce ingredients, I like to toss the spices in and toast those for a few seconds. And what I like to use is some ground cumin, some smoked paprika, some turmeric, a little bit of dried oregano, a pinch of freshly ground black pepper, and then last but never least, a few shakes of cayenne. And what we'll do is stir those in and let them cook for just like 30 seconds, which is going to sort of wake up the flavors. And once that's been accomplished, we can go ahead and add our tomato product, which for me is just going to be a simple tomato puree, or passata as it said on the jar. And then we'll also want to add a splash of water, and we'll stir everything together and wait for things to come back to a simmer. And by the way, any kind of tomato sauce will work here. All right, I'm using pure tomato, but you could use a marinara or some leftover pasta sauce. All right, the only difference that would make would be adjusting your seasonings. Which reminds me, if we are using just tomato, we're probably going to need a nice big pinch of salt. So I went ahead and stirred that in. And then once everything does start to simmer again, we'll reduce our heat to medium-low, and we'll give this a quick taste for seasoning. And if it tastes good, mine did, before we add our egg, I like to stir in some fresh herb. Right, this time it was cilantro, but parsley will work, as would dill. And then I also at this point like to crumble in a little bit of feta. Right, you can just add this to the top when you serve it, but I want a little bit in there to simmer with the egg while it cooks. Speaking of which, let's take our spoon and make a little bit of a well in the middle, into which we will carefully transfer in one large egg. And yes, I always crack that into a small bowl first, since if you do, it will never break. And if we just try to crack the egg directly into that well, it almost always breaks. I mean, that's the universe for you. And nobody cares if that yolk is centered, except people like me. So I carefully nudge that over a little bit. And then of course, eggs don't come seasoned, so I'm going to sprinkle that with a little bit of salt. And that's it, our shakshuka is done, as soon as our egg is cooked to our liking. And to speed the operation up, I highly suggest we cover this up, and then we'll let that simmer in the sauce for, I don't know, maybe 3, 4, 5 minutes. Okay, it all depends on how well done you want your egg. But for me personally, I do not want it cooked all the way through. Okay, I want a runny yolk, or at least a jammy yolk. So I'm only going to go to this point, and let me go ahead and give this the old shaka so you can see what it looks like. Okay, that is definitely undercooked, but that's fine. Because by the time we pull this off and garnish it and grab some bread, that hot sauce will have finished cooking it perfectly. So what I'm trying to say is how long you cook this is going to be up to you. I mean, you are after all the Tim Gunn of when your shakshuka for one is done. But anyway, that was looking perfect. So I pulled it off the heat and I placed this next to some sliced bread. And then to finish this up, I'm going to go ahead and crumble over some more feta, since I really love feta, as well as a shake or two of Aleppo chili flake. And then I also like to do a little extra drizzle of olive oil, since as I mentioned, you literally can't eat enough of that. And then I finished up with some freshly torn cilantro leaves. And that's it, our shakshuka for one is done. So let me go ahead and grab a spoon and a piece of bread and dig in. And that, my friends, as I said earlier, is without a doubt one of the best breakfasts ever. I mean, a bowl of Captain Crunch is nice, but it is not this nice. And not only will this sustain you for a good part of the day, while it does, you're going to feel very happy and satisfied, and all will seem right with the world. And as I mentioned, even though that egg was slightly undercooked when we pulled it off, after sitting on the hot sauce for a couple minutes, it is finished cooking perfectly, or at least for my taste. All right, if you want to cook your egg all the way through until it's hard, go ahead. All right, I'm not mad, but I am a little bit disappointed, since I think a slightly runny yolk really makes this so much more special. Oh, and the last thing to cover before we sign off, do not, under any circumstances, try to eat this without bread, of some sort. Right, eating a shakshuka without bread is like dancing without music. Have you ever seen someone dance when there's no music playing? That is not a good look. So whether you serve some nice sliced baguette or some beautiful Middle Eastern style flatbread, we are going to need something to dip in here to sop up all that amazing sauce. But no matter what kind of bread you serve with this, the next time you're making breakfast alone and you want to take a break from that bowl of cereal, I cannot think of anything more perfect. Which is why I really do hope you give this a try soon. So please follow the links below for the ingredient amounts, a printable written recipe, and much more info as usual. And as always, enjoy.